So this was taken before sunset. In fact, you could see the sun had, we were in twilight and the sun had just kind of started to break through and it was hitting in here. But the lighthouse was still lit up, and so it was still low light. And this one again required a tripod, and I actually exposed for the sky because I knew that if I did a long enough exposure and just let the light read off where I metered, and I knew if I did a long enough exposure, the light from the lighthouse would light up enough of the building to create this nice shot. And it did. This was taken after sunset. And the glow over here is from some lighting, some lights that were nearby. And it's a very long exposure. And what it allowed to have happen is the metal on this building became very soft and created a really cool feel to the light. So things sometimes that you can't shoot during the day, because if the sun hit this during the day, this would be very blown out. Wouldn't be able to get a very good exposure on it. Also, you'd have these really strong shadows from on the corrugation from where the, you have the peaks and the valleys. This would create a very strong black and white pattern. So by taking this photo in after the sun had gone down, allowed me to get a really nice photo of it and created this beautiful soft metallic sheen. This was done in the California State Fair, tripod, long exposure, and the sun had not yet gone down. It was close to going down, which is why the sky is on all these colors, this nice light gradient, because there was still enough sun to light up the sky. I used a colored polarizer for this, which is why everything is orange and pink, and it was an orange-pink polarizer. So I put that on my camera and did a long exposure that created the movement in the Ferris wheel. But I also had in the foreground this hot dog stand that allowed there to be something in focus so that it created a nice contrast to what was out of focus. I apologize for the racket. My cat is literally pitching a temper tantrum. And then this was also done, this was done at the Boise State Fair. The sun had gone down. I was using a colored polarizer, which made the sky purple to magenta. The sun had gone down, and this was, the moon. And the swing had started to go, and you could see the blur for the people. And framing for this is what really made it great. And that is something you have to just take a lot of pictures. Sorry. Calliope, please stop. Okay, she left the room. Anyway, so the moon had come up and the sun had gone down, and so it was enough to be able to get the beautiful long exposure. And in order to create this shot, I stopped f-stop way down to f22. So what you have to be careful when you're using a small aperture is this isn't in focus. And it's okay here, but it's not quite so much here. And I got just enough of an exposure that you can see the face on the moon. This probably would have been a good time to have exposed the moon and then came back and burned it in a blended mode over, but I didn't. This is literally the exposed slide, because this was shot with slide film. This was taken right around sunset in Alaska, and you can see the light on the surface. It's very blue because of this. This is Mount McKinley. So this is Denali National Park. And tripod. It was windy, so I had to shoot a very high shutter speed, which is why you don't really have any motion. You have very little. You're pretty much capturing reflections without movement. I would have liked to have done a longer exposure on this, but the problem is it would have caused my foreground to blur, and I didn't want that. So this was done with a very large aperture and a fast shutter speed. Sunset, this was Pacifica, California. The sun had gone down and created the beautiful color in the sky. And so it's really dark in this area. And there was a starfish on the rock. And this picture without that starfish is not any good. I mean, it's beautiful, but it really needed that starfish because it ties that beautiful orange. I did color it, which you can see. I didn't do a very good job of this. You don't want people to see your magic. But you can see I did color it and I did lighten it because the starfish was dark. So I did dodge on the scanned slide. But I put orange on it because it was gray so that it would tie in with this. So if I would go back and redo this slide to make this a better shot, I would zoom in a little more and be very careful with how I did my starfish because you can see it's been manipulated. I didn't do a very, very good job with that. However, what I did expose for, because what I wanted was these I wanted to be able to see this. I could see a little bit in the water, but I wanted nice contrast. But what I exposed for was right around here. And everything else just sort of fell into place. And again, I did an overexposure and an underexposure, and this turned out to be the right exposure. Early morning, I put my camera on a bridge, and I actually allowed for this to be really dark down here. I didn't expose this more because I wanted this beautiful color, these soft reflections, a little bit of mystery because this is very dark down here. I created this intentionally. You can see the proper to expose for this exposure where you keep the color like this. You can expose for the sky, but I exposed for this and then underexposed it by a full f-stop. And this was shot with f13. And I exposed it for 3 minutes. And it was shot 5 o'clock in the morning. And I don't remember where it is. Somewhere near Savannah, I believe. Okay, so this was sunset. Sun had gone down, and I did a long exposure here, which makes it look like it was bright. It was not. It was pretty dark, which you can see the lights are on because it was still dark. And I just got these really cool, this car speeding past and this giant crack in the street. And the whole message here is just sort of, you know, the building has been here for 100 years or maybe longer, you know, whereas humans going by are fleeting. And I just did a long exposure, just overexposed this by a couple f-stops to get the right exposure. Again, I had to shoot 2 different scenes. You know, I got the moon in a different shot. Probably need to clean that up just a little bit, but that's where the moon was, and I just got the second exposure of the moon. And you can see there was a bag right there. I think it was a trash bag, but it kind of looks like, you know, okay, so here's where the story comes in. And something had leaked on the ground, and it was some chemical that had created this stain in the street. And so I kind of turned it into, maybe that's a body, and turned this red so that it created this creepy murder mystery kind of scene. Okay, so I'm not advocating y'all taking photos while driving, but I have done this. And I was driving. It was late at night. It was probably, I don't know, 11 o'clock at night. and it was, I'm trying to remember what time of the year it was, but it was dark, and I stopped my camera, the aperture down. So I used a small aperture so it would force it to do a long exposure. And I exposed for the sky. And then the camera was sitting on the dashboard of the car. And so I wasn't doing anything dangerous. And I was using I have a cable release. And I was using the cable release, and this is a 1 to 2 second exposure. And you can start to, the more you take photography, the more you'll be able to look at lines and guess based on how fast I was going. You know, this is it was 30-second to a 1-minute exposure. You just can see that in the length of the lines. But this was a truck. And that's what you're seeing, the lines of the truck. And so I also shot the moon separately and put it over the moon and created this really cool abstract road scene. And the colors are just what the colors were. It just kind of came out that way. I'm not really sure why this was green. I don't remember. Maybe been green lights on the truck. But this was a giant truck and some cars and the road. This is the road, and then there was something on the dashboard right there. Sunset, this is the ocean, the Pacific Ocean. This was just an island. And so the sun had gotten way down. The sun was over here. And I did a very long exposure. This is foam. It just did a very, very long exposure. It was slide film, and it created this beautiful serious kind of gradient of color in the pattern. It was just sort of a lucky shot. I mean, what I saw with my eyes didn't look anything like that. It just looked like the ocean in the dark because the sun had gone below the horizon, and this is the waves. These are the waves coming in, and the tide was going out, which is how this foam got trapped. And so this is like maybe a minute for it to do that. Yeah, I mean, you would never see that with your eye. That is probably the most exciting thing about night photography and why I have done so much. I have so many night shots. And I've done so much because, you know, everybody, it's quiet. Other people have gone home, and you're going to create stuff with a camera in manual exposure using just natural lighting. It's just natural outdoor lighting. It was just the ambient light that was left over from the sunset and a long exposure. No one is ever going to see that with their eye. And it's beautiful. And some weird thing happened, unfortunately, right here. And I need to fix it. But some weird thing happened. But just this beautiful, beautiful shot. It's abstract. This is what I would consider abstract digital photography. And it was just something I had been shooting, and I just set up, and I don't know, I just instinctively took the shot. And sometimes I find when I take photos without thinking too much, just following my intuition, my inner artist, so to speak, I just create some really great stuff. Okay, I'm going to stop here and continue this in the next video. I want to be able to talk about all these, and I'm not going to be able to do it in a minute.